Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ever have one of those days? Well, it's been one of those days for us. We're sorry we're a little bit late, but you have...
It's been that kind of week.
Yeah, it has been. You have logged on, joined us, and tuned in to Distill It, a 360-degree view of life and sports. We are so happy to be here today, as always. I am Wendy Rosenthal, by the way, and I am joined by my esteemed host, co-host, friend, partner in crime, Eira Schwitzer. Welcome.
You got it right this time.
We're practicing. Where's the applause? We're all a little off today. Sorry about that. We come to you every other week here on the beautiful UBN network, our second or third home. We love it here, and we want to say hello to our frazzled but yet wonderful Jarvis Essex, our amazing engineer who has had to get us ready at the very last minute today. So thank you for that. Jarvis is our security blanket, and we really appreciate him. Today on Distill It, we are very... this is a topic that I wasn't so sure that I would be as excited about as I now am.
You've become very excited.
I've become even more excited about it than when we talked about doing it. We are going to be talking today about pro sports overseas and how our athletes and athletes from overseas kind of they either create, extend, or reignite their careers by going overseas. We know that it's a very hard thing to go from collegiate sports here in the U.S. or even if you're not in college and you just do a walk on to a pro team. The percentages are shockingly low. We've talked about it in the past. And there's this whole world out there. I didn't even realize it was as big as it is.
Something beyond our own country.
Something beyond our own country.
It's
so
possible.
We wanted to explore that, and for that reason we have our esteemed guest who is in studio with us. I'll introduce him in a moment, but we also would like to welcome from overseas our favorite foreign correspondent from London.
Marshall, you look so focused, so serious, and so focused today.
Marshall Norball. Welcome, Marshall.
Or you're trying really hard to stay awake.
Uh-oh, can't hear him. See, it's been one of those days.
There you go.
There we go.
There, got it.
Good evening. It's very late your time, and as always, we love having you.
But it's worth it.
Well, we thought it'd be we love having you on, and we thought it would be great to have you give a perspective of maybe athletes that are coming from Europe or other parts of the world into the U.S. as well. Because guess what? There is a nice percentage of athletes that do end up in the pros over here, and they're stealing our spots, our American spots. Now,
That's it. Spots are being stolen.
So we'll hear from Marshall in a minute. We would love to hear your voice in all of this conversation. So if you have any questions or would like to speak to either of our guests, you can give us a ring on 323-284-7826, or you can Skype in on UBN Radio 1 guest. And we always like to start off the show with a little bit of what's going on in the sports world since we were last on a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to talk about something personal. But before we get there, we want to give a big shout out to our friend and supporter of the show, Terrell Owens, as he is once again in the position to be voted into the NFL Hall of Fame, which...
He's already in Philly. Right?
Yeah, he's already in Philly.
For you, Terrell.
Going to the Super Bowl. And we really hope that the... voters, the sports writers, really look at him as an athlete and what he did for the sport, and not nominate him, put him in this year. Put him in. It's time. Also, we want to give a shout out to, not that they're really listening, they're probably busy right now, but to the New England Patriots.
No, they're listening.
They're listening.
Yes.
And the Philadelphia Eagles. We can hardly wait for the Super Bowl. Marshall, I'm still kicking all of your butts in our pool. I haven't tallied last week, but I think
I took a few risks.
You took some
championship weekend.
Didn't work out for you, man.
Yeah, I did say on the email that I knew that Philadelphia were going to win, but for purely tactical reasons of trying to win
Yeah.
the competition, I had to go with the Vikings.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well for you, but
Yeah, that
okay.
didn't work out very
Worked
well.
out for me, and I am
Didn't
very
work
happy
out very
about
well.
that.
Anyway, the best two teams are there, so it should be a goodie.
It should be. I think the Rams should have gotten closer, but that's okay. We'll give them next year.
Yeah, next year.
So, a quick story.
You've been so excited to share this story.
Oh my God. I don't know if any of you have been reading our blogs, but Eira and I both have 5-year-old boys, and they are incredibly anxious to play flag football, which we've now put them in. And we mentioned this the last show. There was a little bit, it got off to a rough start.
Right.
But this last weekend, oh my gosh. I won't even go into the fact that the coach wasn't there, except to say that the coach wasn't there. So we had dads fill in for our sons as they did their photo day.
Dad that I wrangled to step in and coach.
Yes. Parents, for those of you who have not yet experienced the joys of photo day in sports, it is an experience. But the interesting bit was one of the dads, a coach, he stepped up to coach, and he kind of enlisted another dad to come in, and they needed a couple of dads to stand there, or a couple of coaches to stand there for the group picture. And our amazing substitute coach, who, really stepped up, I'll give him that, decided that 2 was not enough and that he needed a third, and he grabbed another father that was standing right by. And Eira and I were standing there watching this whole thing, and my husband happened to be standing behind us, and all of a sudden we see like this, waving our direction, and we're like, what? Okay. And what happened after that? I went over to find out if they wanted us to come, and what was the response?
No, not you. The guy behind you.
The guy behind you
Your
in the
husband,
glasses.
The other man.
The other
we
man.
only have 3. We need a 4th.
We need a 4th man, and we don't need any of you moms who are standing right there all watching this going, what the heck?
Yeah.
So, this isn't an era where we're trying to call out a little bit of gender discrimination, and, we won't say it's harassment, but it was pretty
There's
shocking.
Some gender bias going on.
There was some gender bias
Absolutely.
happening.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't maybe sound like it's that big of a deal, and it isn't in comparison to many other really not so great things that are happening.
2 of these dads had been to one game.
But 3 of the dads had been to
3
one
had
game.
been to one, exactly. And the other dad had just shown up that day. This was his very first game. The rest of us, all of us moms, are there week after week. We're setting them up. We're washing the uniforms.
We're bringing
packing
the snacks.
We're doing it all. But they didn't need us in the pictures. They needed all the dads, including the ones that they've never met, they've never seen. Show up today. It's picture day, and you get to be the picture.
And you get to be all the moms get to not be in the picture. So Eira promised this dad that we would talk about it on the radio.
And we did.
And now
and
we
I
can
gave
send
him,
him
and
the
I
link.
gave him the chance to call in and defend himself, and he did not. So he was very embarrassed after I called it to his attention in front of everyone.
Exactly. So the joys of youth sports, we're learning about it every day.
Yeah.
We don't want to take any more time talking about youth sports. We want to talk to our in-studio guest. We are very, very grateful that he has come here today. He has an extensive bio that I'm not going to read, and I'm sure that some of what his credentials will come out in our conversation. But David Blu went to USC, which is why I'm wearing my USC hat today, because Eira and I are also alums of USC. So go Trojans, fight on. So that's where David started his basketball career, playing for the Trojans. As a senior, he won the John Wooden Award for Best Player in California. Had a brief career, or you were drafted into the NBA.
No,
No?
I had a cup of coffee with the Kings after my second year.
Was it a good coffee? A latte at Starbucks?
You know what? There weren't many Starbucks in Sacramento at that time. That was 2005. It was a good time. I learned a lot. Learned a lot about myself. Learned a lot about the NBA, and certainly what it takes to get there, even though I never stuck.
Well, that's all right. You didn't stick, but you went on to have an amazing career in Israel.
I'm
I
thankful.
can't wait to hear the story, and this is why we really wanted you on, because you made a choice, whether it was a forced choice or not, to play overseas. And your experience overseas playing for many, not just the I'm going to say it, Maccabi Electra, I said it the right way,
Yep.
many other teams around Europe. And you were quite successful and had a really, from what I've understood, a very fulfilling 10 year plus career in Israel.
Yeah, well, 7 in Israel and 3 in Italy and 1 in France. So 11 total.
So you traveled all over.
All
And
over.
you never went to London?
I've only been to Heathrow.
my God.
Only to Heathrow.
Shocking.
That's on my bucket list, London, for
That's
sure.
shocking. That's shocking. So we wanted just to start off to understand, why did you, was it a forced decision, or was it something that after you kind of had that coffee and came away not feeling like the NBA was going to be the right place for you?
Well, actually, after 2002, after USC, I tried out for different teams. I played summer leagues. I had a couple teams say they were going to draft me in the second round. When the draft did come, I didn't get drafted. Because I am half Jewish, half black, I was able to make aliyah and become a citizen of Israel. So I could play as a local player. Because overseas, you're only allowed to have a certain number of Americans on each team. But because I was able to get a passport, I could play in Israel as a local player. So that was a value that I could add to the team.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm going to jump in. Sorry, because I was doing research. Both of us were doing a lot of research on this, and I read that often the local players don't get paid nearly as much as the American players. And I don't want you to disclose what you got paid, but did you find taking that local route affected that?
Absolutely. In Israel, the team pays the taxes to the state of Israel, and then the players get tax credits, and then we file that with USA. So the team has to pay like a 20% tax for an American player, but 100% tax for an
Goodness
Israeli
gracious.
player.
Right.
And so they couldn't pay me as much. But the trade-off was I lived in Tel Aviv, and I played for the best team and organization in Europe. So it was like I could take more money in some cold, snowy place in Eastern Europe, or I could live on the beaches of Tel Aviv. So it's a
You
choice.
chose Tel Aviv.
I chose
It's a
the
good
beaches.
choice.
And you won championships
And
while
I
you were
won
there.
two European championships. Yeah, I was in the EuroLeague 4 times, and we won 6 out of 7 local Israeli championships, and I had a good career. I'm thankful. Very.
I'm going to throw out some numbers here because I was actually very, very fascinated. Like I said, I wasn't sure what I would find when I started researching, and as I was digging deeper, I was really, really surprised. So, international sports leagues around the world is a big business, not just, what you would think FIFA. Okay, yes, we know FIFA is a ginormous big business, but sports leagues all over the world that include baseball, basketball, football. It's a business that has a lot of feeder businesses into it as well. Businesses that help you find a team, to help you, go into whatever draft in whatever country, to help you find an agent, to help funnel you into an international sports scene. That's number one, which I found to be very, very fascinating. And I don't know, maybe you can talk about it in a minute, if you ran across some of those organizations and how they operate. But the second thing is I found some numbers that the NCAA put out a couple years ago. The statistics of collegiate athletes that go on to professional sports, let's say on average, is about 1.5% of every college player will go into professional sports. Now, how long they stay once they're there drops off tremendously. Across the board, when they included international teams at every level, the numbers jump up like 2 to 3%. So a college athlete looking at what their options are, like it's amazing how much more opportunity you might have to like really kind of funnel you or focus on going overseas.
Basketball is a universal game like no other. I mean, soccer would be another one, but basketball is something that you can play by yourself. You can play one-on-one, so it doesn't matter how many people you have. You can play basketball. As far as the technology goes, that's what it is. It's the technology. It's social media. So there were leagues going on around the world 20 years ago, but nobody knew about them because they weren't publicized.
Yeah.
As they've gotten more publicized, they've gained more popularity, and therefore they've been able to add more teams overseas, so there's more opportunities for American players if they don't go to the NBA.
And yet the focus still is so American heavy. I mean, for so many of the athletes going through the college system, the focus really is being able to stay and play domestically.
Well, this is our home.
Yeah.
For Americans, we want to stay here. We watch the NBA every day, and those are our heroes. So
But the numbers show that your odds are drastically reduced.
the one thing about
it's-
athletes is you talk
I
about
know.
numbers. Athletes
Yeah.
don't really care about numbers.
Yeah.
All they care about is what they do in the gym and
Right.
are they putting in the work. And everybody your whole life tells you the chances of you making it are slim. You're not going to make it. And
Right.
the athletes that don't listen to that, they become pros.
Well, not all of them, but yes.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Because no, I mean, I laugh only because at the distillery, it is one of the things that we talk about with our clients a whole lot. Certainly at the collegiate level and at the professional level, it's just that idea of, yes, on the one hand, you want to be able to balance the fact that you need to stay focused, very single-mindedly focused on what it is that you're doing, what your goal is, right? At the same time, there has to be a part of you that can take some time, some energy, and invest it into what those other options might be, if, God forbid, your one goal doesn't pan out, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like at the collegiate level, certainly, there just isn't a whole lot of, there's not a whole lot of preparation for what you do if you don't go, pro. But beyond that, if you don't go pro here in the U.S., there are still a whole lot of opportunities, like you were saying with the numbers.
I was
a whole
shocked.
lot more opportunities to be able to go overseas. So why don't we do more to sort of encourage athletes to
Well,
the collegiate level?
It doesn't start at the collegiate level. It starts at when they're
Earlier.
7 years old.
Yeah.
If you tell your kids, hey, if you don't go to the NBA, you can go overseas and play.
Right.
Then they have that in their mind.
Yeah.
But by the time they get to 18, 19, 20, they're just thinking NBA because that's all they've been told. That's all
Yeah,
their
that's all they
friends and
see.
family have been saying, oh, you're going to go to the NBA.
Yeah.
They don't say you're going to go play overseas.
I mean,
Right.
in the NBA, there's something like 60 people drafted a year, like in the NBA draft. It's
Yeah.
I mean, even football, quadruples that number.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a
Minute
And only the
numbers.
first round is guaranteed.
exactly. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. Marshall, I'm going to ask you this question. Did you know there's a Rivals professional football league over there? Have you ever heard of this?
No, I didn't know. It's
Have you heard of it, David?
no,
The football league?
but I must admit something. Listening to what David was just sharing,
Yeah.
it kind of, I think it'd be a really great opportunity for you hear a lot about the one and dones now in American sports, in particularly in basketball. I think it'd be so much more encouraging at that kind of collegiate level if they are considering, well, I want to get drafted to the NBA very quickly. And I can understand for monetary reasons, but there's no reason why they couldn't maybe spend a year or two in Spain or in Israel or in Italy, where there are very well established basketball teams playing really good level of basketball professionally, where they can get experience and hone their skills more, as opposed to just getting drafted straight into the NBA and still being a little bit undercooked.
Yeah, how do you feel about that, David?
It's challenging for a kid because being a student athlete at like USC is so much fun. And you're getting everybody's telling you how important your degree is, how important graduating from college is. And if you're also maybe scared to go overseas and live by yourself in Spain or Italy or wherever it may be.
Sure.
So that's really it. It's like you do have that choice, but the idea of growing up as a kid is you go to high school, then you go to college, then you go to the pros, and that's kind of how you're built. And that's
All
what
locally,
you're taught.
all
All
domestically,
locally.
right.
You never come in and say, oh, I can go play 1 year college, go overseas for 1 year, go to the NBA. That's never talked about.
Right.
It's never talked about, but some actually athletes have opted for that.
Sure.
I mean, across all sports, not just the NBA,
Yeah.
I mean, not just basketball players, where they've said, okay, you know what, I know I'm not going to get drafted, so let me go, let me find a team, let me hone my skills, let me get some game reels done so that I can come back. And it's worked for some.
Well, it's more than just basketball. It's also school.
Yeah.
Being a student athlete is hard. I mean, there's a lot it's like two jobs. You have to be a student and you have to be an athlete.
Right.
And when you talk about sports in college, they really work you and you're tired and it's hard to do your homework and go to class and be motivated. And so when you tell a kid that he can go straight to play basketball, don't worry about going to school, focus on what you love doing, what you're good at, what you're going to make money at, it's hard to turn that down. So I know some of the kids, Brandon Jennings,
I read about him.
and Jeremy Tyler, who played in Israel. I played against both of those guys. They went from high school overseas for 1 year and then to the NBA.
Right, because they can.
Because they can.
Because of the restrictions now where the NBA can't draft anybody straight out of high school. They have to have that year.
So they chose, instead of going to school and going to class and, going through that whole process, they chose to go overseas, make money, and focus on improving their game and playing at a high level with adults.
Now, one of the things that I read was that it's often very hard for especially a young athlete who makes the choice to not go to college but to go overseas to really adapt, because you're thrown into what is more likely adults playing, not, even a 25-year-old at that point, if you're 17, is going to feel like you're playing with a bunch of adults.
Right.
But that the fans are also very different overseas. There are many stories that I know both
Much
you and I
more
read.
verbal. Some places
Verbal,
much more abusive.
They'll throw things at you.
Yeah.
They'll, everything from fireworks.
No, but really, aside from
Flares,
the culture
yeah.
shock,
Oh, yeah.
Being in a new
It's
country.
it's more cosmopolitan. It's more.
Is that the word, Marshall? Cosmopolitan? Is that what comes
That's
to
the
mind
word.
for you?
Yeah, it's I
Crazy
can
Not
Yeah.
say
dangerous,
from-
not
from-
abusive.
I can relate to it from a football
Cosmopolitan.
perspective or a soccer perspective.
Sure.
Fans they speak their mind.
Yes.
If they don't like something, they're not just gonna boo. They're gonna express it.
Right.
It can be a lot more of a hostile environment, especially say when an English team plays on the mainland continent in Europe. It's often a completely different culture. And there's certain things that you probably wouldn't necessarily see in England, to where you will get a lot more hostile environment. And I'm sure, David also experienced that when he played in big derbies in Israel.
I like to tell people I'm thankful that I made it out. I mean, there's places that you play where they're throwing flares,
Sure.
lit flares on the court,
Sure.
full water bottles, coins, lit cigarettes,
Yeah.
lighters, cell phone batteries,
Yeah.
you name it. They're throwing it on the court, and there's no penalty for the team whose fans are doing that.
Sure.
I just have to ask the question, why? Why would that be okay?
Because it's Europe. I don't know.
Because it's Europe.
It's Europe. I
Marcia,
don't know.
because you're all
There's no-
crazy over there.
It's
there-
not just Europe.
all
It's in
adds to
South
the atmosphere,
America.
I guess.
I
From a European
Here's a story. When I was at USC, we played against UCLA, and we played at the sports arena, which was our home.
Yes.
So at some point in the game, a bottle comes out of the crowd and lands on the court.
Right.
We, USC, at that moment get a technical foul.
Right.
UCLA gets 2 free throws and the ball.
Right.
So turns out it was a UCLA fan. They got the UCLA fan out of there, but the damage was done.
Right.
We got our technical fouls. They got their 2 points. The momentum changed, and I forgot what happened in the game. But overseas, there's no penalty. There, if you play in somebody else's arena, nobody's going to rat out the guy that
Right.
throws a water bottle at the opposing
Yeah.
team. And there's also
Because they'll probably beat the living crap out of them
At some
based
point.
on what you're,
No,
You're right.
on how
you
they're
know,
acting.
And the thing is, there's no there's no filters with regard to racial comments that people make.
Exactly.
I played for an Israeli team, so everywhere we went, people were not happy to
Happy,
see us.
yeah.
And there were anti-Israel flags, and a lot of the guys on my team were African American, so that was even double the issues traveling around Europe. So it's every country is different. Every country has a different style of play. Every country has a different group of fans and how they react to the game. Some are more aggressive and violent than others. And I've got tons of stories about, some of the dangers that we were in.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Well, I think it's fascinating because on the downside of it, it's those dangers plus. I mean, there are so many stories about players, interestingly, playing in the Middle East, where for the most part it's okay. But then, there's a great story about a couple of American players that are playing in Iraq, and how they have handlers that will tell them when there's bombs going off that it's just fireworks,
Right.
because they don't want to freak them out. And being in South America, where you could be left with no money and having to make your way home, and you run into all sorts of issues. So while we're kind of been positioning it that this is a really great opportunity, there's some big
Huge inherent risks.
Huge inherent risks.
And also, at least with some of the clients we've spoken to, just in terms of how contracts are negotiated, you're taking such a huge risk, and there's so much uncertainty built into playing overseas. You know, I mean, it's at least from what we understand, contracts are pretty much year to year, and even within that, if you don't have a great game today, you're on the plane tomorrow. So
you never know.
So for so many players, it's much more comforting to work as hard as you can to get into the NBA, just because there's some sense of security across the board. Whereas
there's
going
guarantees.
overseas, there are guarantees, and you go overseas, and that's just not the case.
It's not the case.
You know, day to day, anything could happen.
You can get hurt and be out a month, and then you know, you come back and they're not quite happy with you, and they send you home. And
right.
you know, if you're an American and you're playing a Russian, you get sent home. You know, chances are you're probably not going to sue a Russian team from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So most American players just let it go.
Right.
You know, they just let the contract go. You know, they release them and then they move on. But that's part of the game. That's what guys have to understand when they do go over there. And that's why it's so important to be politically correct with the fans and the management, to get along, to be a good citizen of the state, and also stay healthy. If you do those things, then, you know, you should be able to, even if you have a bad day, if the fans are on your side and the management's on your side because you're a good guy, you can stay.
Right.
But there's guys that, you know, let their hair grow, they let their beard grow, they don't want to take pictures, they don't want to sign autographs, you know, they always have a tough look on their face. And when they have a bad 2 weeks, they wonder why nobody's on their side.
Right.
So
it's like you almost have to have more decorum, you know, more consciousness about the fans and what's going on than maybe if you were playing here in the U.S.
Yeah, you can't, you know, a lot of people, the media isn't necessarily great overseas. I mean, it's not like it's great now in America, but sometimes there's things lost in translation. When you answer a question in English, they have to write it in their local language.
Yeah.
But a lot of Americans, they don't want to talk to the media. They don't want anything to do with them. So the media doesn't write good things about them.
Right.
But that's part of, you know, I learned my rookie year of playing the game, you know, not just basketball, but the off the court game.
So who's guiding you? I mean, you have an agent, I'm assuming. It's how you,
agents,
for the most part?
You know, agents get you the contract.
You
Your
have
agents
mentors?
are Americans.
Yeah.
They have partners in Europe. They have other clients.
yeah.
You really have to rely on the older players that are on the teams. I was lucky that I played for Maccabi Tel Aviv, and we had, my rookie year, we had 4 other Americans.
Yeah.
And one American, another American that made Aliyah, became Israeli. So I had 5 Americans that were all older than me, kind of walking me through the steps of getting into the game. And I didn't listen to them until my second year over there. But you need older guys to help you.
Yeah. No, we talk about this all the time. Mentorship is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially if you're entering into really, really uncharted waters. Really, I mean, you probably had a somewhat of an advantage because you were wanting to be in Israel and you were in a position where you could play as a local and all of that. But you know, across the board, people even traveling overseas, you know, where Americans are always so looked down upon because we don't travel all that often overseas. Even that experience is a very, very, very big challenge. So you said something too that I wanted to pick up on. I lived in London for 10 years and traveled and worked all over Europe. And one of the things I think you said is very key is you have to really respect and jump into the culture. I think, you know, Europeans love Americans, and I'll say I think other places as well, and they love some of the aspects of Americans. But one of the things that we do come off as is being like really ignorant as to like where places are, what languages are spoken, or the culture, and that works against us no matter what we're doing. So I can imagine that having played in not just Israel but in Europe as well, that was something you really had to work to do.
Well, that was really a key for me. I mean, my first year going overseas, I was just thinking about it as a pit stop. and all I could think about was getting back to the NBA. So I didn't care about making friends with the Israeli guys on the team or going to the, restaurants and learning the food and the signs. I just thought, I'm just going to go to the gym, work out. I don't really want to be here. And, I did my thing. I was okay. I didn't get much time because I was a rookie. My second year, kind of the same thing, but I was a little bit better, more experienced. I could get around the city. Then I went back to the NBA for a little bit, and then I went back overseas. And when I went back overseas, I realized that I had to appreciate where I am today. I'm living in Italy. This is great. I'm living in Italy. Let me enjoy Italian culture, go to eat Italian food, go to different Italian events. And then I really started to play better because I was focused on performing for the team I was on, making friends with my teammates, learning the culture, and that was then I realized that that's really important to play overseas, is to appreciate that you're playing basketball, you're making money, and you live in a foreign country.
Right.
It's like
how cool is that?
How cool
right?
is that?
Yeah.
So once you get that, then you get momentum.
So when you were in that place, was the NBA done for you? I mean, was there ever a point when you were overseas that you were thinking this is just a stepping stone to get back to the NBA? I mean, ultimately your goal was to want.
Well,
to
as you said, every contract is like year to year. So when you sign the contract to come overseas in the summer, you start to prepare for that. If you can focus on, okay, this is where I am this year, and you play well, when you come back to the summer, you think about the NBA.
Yeah.
You watch the NBA when you're overseas. The games are on at like 2 a.m. When you're living over there because of time difference.
Marshall and I spent many hours in the middle of the night watching both football and basketball.
That's normal for me.
Yeah.
But once you appreciate where you are and focus on that season, performing for that team, when the season finishes, then you come back, then you start to talk with your agent about the NBA. And then if you don't go to the NBA, then you got to go back overseas. Mm-hmm. And the key is to keep moving up levels of teams when you're overseas. And the only way to do that is to win and to get the management on your side, because the next team is going to call the management of the old team.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they give a good glowing report, well, then the new team that's a bit higher, they're going to sign you.
Right.
And then you're just going to work your way up through the ranks of teams.
So for those of you who've just tuned in, we actually have some friends of ours from overseas, so welcome. And I just wanted to say we're talking with a wonderful guest, David Blu, about athletes that either by choice or not always by choice end up playing their professional careers overseas. And I just wanted to throw something to Marshall because it was hard to find information about athletes that are from overseas coming into the U.S. Do you find over there that that's something that anybody focuses on, or is it the same way that it is here? Like, oh, okay, I couldn't make it into my, sport of choice in my home country, so I'll look at alternatives.
Yeah, in this country, I guess it really from a football perspective, soccer perspective, players tend to go to the US as more as their career starts to come to the end of the cycle. So, for example, you've seen the likes of David Beckham, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard playing, deciding to go to the US pretty much after they've had a very illustrious career playing in England or in some other parts of Europe. So it's not as common. There are some exceptions. I guess you can look at Jay Ajayi, who's doing very well with the Philadelphia Eagles, was originally at Miami. Dolphins. He's having a very good NFL career by most standards, and in a lot of people's fantasy teams, and got a Super Bowl appearance to look forward to this weekend. But generally speaking, it's more. It's kind of the opposite in many respects to what David was saying, and the experience playing in Europe. The Premier League or playing for one of the big 5 leagues in Europe is considered to be the pinnacle.
Right.
But as you finish your career, the lure and the money and the opportunities still exist where you have the ability to play at a very competitive level, but you can't handle maybe the day-to-day of one of the elite top European leagues. Then that's where something like the MLS is quite appealing.
I think it's also really interesting to note that, the international leagues are a way for athletes to extend their career. Like Marshall's talking about it coming this direction with the Premiership players. But I read a lot about, again, across the board, not just basketball, but football and baseball, where players are opting at a certain point. They see that their career is maybe not going to continue on, and they can go play internationally. Not just extending their career from a playing standpoint, but from an age standpoint. Like, I can keep playing into my probably mid to later 30s because it's not going to be as rigorous.
Longevity.
It creates longevity. Did you see that a lot, David?
Yeah, older players from the NBA coming overseas. Yeah, that's sort of Dominique Wilkins finished his career overseas. A lot of players finished their career. Now going the other way from Europe to America, Wendy, you said it, stealing the USA's
They
positions.
are. There is a small percentage, but it's consistently there.
Well, I'll tell you, basketball, the NBA isn't just about basketball. It's also a business.
Right.
And when these GMs and the owners are making their teams, they're not necessarily thinking about winning as much as jerseys they're going to sell and bobbleheads and NBA.com subscriptions.
Sure.
So while there's probably 10 point guards in Compton that are qualified, they'll take the one kid from Spain because the NBA can sell merchandise in Spain.
I never looked at it that way.
And the Spanish kid comes over and he plays 1 or 2 years and he realizes, I miss home.
Yeah.
These guys are bigger and stronger and meaner than I am.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Spain.
But the NBA hasn't lost
But
anything.
those 10 guys who are in Compton, they go overseas and they stay overseas. And they never get that opportunity to grind it out, to come to the gym and to just fight every day for their spot. And they will. You take some of these kids, on the street that don't have a lot and you put them in the NBA, they're going to stay in the NBA.
Yeah.
Because they have this opportunity. They can't just go back somewhere and play at a high level. And that's really, that's a reality, that it's a business. It's not just about basketball.
I think that's really an incredible point that I'd not thought about it that way, where it's a league extension and a team extension to get international players, and when you look at it that way, I mean, look at all of the Yao Ming. Look at him. I mean, he opened up basketball probably in a way in China that nobody could have anticipated, and now it's like you have to, where's the next, 6'7"?
Right.
It's funny you say that as
Chinese
well,
player.
because in Europe, and David mentioned it really well, the NBA is big business. It's really is big business, and it has a huge global appeal. And a lot of that global appeal is also through the NBA markets brilliantly its stars, So, for example, now, we talk about players who played in Europe over the last 8-9 years. Ricky Rubio's done a really good job, when he started off originally with Minnesota. But now you look at someone like Kristaps Porzingis, who's the unicorn, and, if I remember, he's Lithuanian, great power forwards in a huge market in New York. That is massive for the NBA and also massive for the Knicks. The fact that they have a player who's got such ability, who plays at the power forward position, but is the size of a center and has skills that make him think that, hang on a minute, can this guy also play point guard?
Right.
It's a huge market.
Right.
It opens up so much more of demographic for them, and it's not just suddenly about what happens in the States. It's now, can we go out and find the best possible talent from wherever they are around the world that also markets them.
Yeah.
Well, there are some ballers. Don't get me wrong. There are some ballers that do come over here, like Ricky Rubio, like Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, these guys can play.
Right.
But there are other guys that sort of fizzle out. And I know some of these guys.
Yeah.
I know the NBA is doing quite a bit in Africa as far as establishing a presence there, building gyms, building camps there, and they're bringing guys over here to play. And they're finding guys because of technology, because of, there's more people involved with teams now traveling the world finding these players.
Well, I mean, do you see a future where maybe, quote unquote the minor leagues, like that the big sports franchises will build minor leagues overseas to cultivate that kind of talent and bring them back and forth in into this country?
I don't think the NBA would build anything quite like that, because the leagues over there are already good. I played in the Euro League, which is very good.
Right.
I mean, it's just like the NBA equivalent. So they have the leagues there. They have their scouts and they go find them on different teams in the different leagues. I think the NBA is probably more focused on a minor league league here, which is the NBDL.
Right.
So they have that, and I think they're cultivating that and growing that.
I was going to also comment on the fact that one of the biggest problems, and I am hoping that you didn't ever have to experience this, one of the biggest problems about playing internationally is the money issue. Not how much, but if.
If you get paid.
Yeah, if you get paid. So how do you see that? Is that still a big problem? Has it gotten better over years?
Has not gotten better.
Really?
Yeah.
That's too bad.
And, the problem is that, again, you come up where if you're 2 weeks late on your payment, do you stop practicing? Do you stop playing in games? You don't want to. In my case, I did. I stopped coming to practice.
Wow.
And
so you had this challenge.
I had this challenge, and I protested, and eventually I got paid. But a lot of players don't, and the agents will say, no, it's okay. It's coming. They just had some money problems, this or that, and they just kind of, and, a month and a half goes by, and then maybe you'll get paid a month.
Right.
But you're still owed a month.
Yeah.
But you got paid, so you're happy. So now you keep playing another month. And that's when you get in a situation where guys, season's over, they come back, they're owed 2 months. What are you going to do? You're going to sue the team, from Los Angeles. So you're just going to walk away.
Well, and there's so many players waiting to play. So if
And
you
there's
leave
so many
and you
players.
don't fight for
They'll
your
find someone
they're going to
else.
find someone else to replace you.
They're going to find someone else.
And is that a function of there's just not enough money in terms of ticket sales and sponsorship revenues overseas? Is it because you have team owners that aren't sophisticated enough to manage that? Like, why does that happen so commonly?
That also, those teams overseas are sponsored by companies. So when the economy is not doing well, those sponsors are not making money. They can't put in the same amount of money. It also goes back to where you're injured. If you get injured and doctor says, well, you're out a month, well, now, the team's considering, well, why are we going to pay this guy? He's not playing. He's just hurt, and then you come back and they want to see how you do. Do you play well? Do you respond? Yeah. And if you do and everything is good, well, no, we got the money now. So you just never know. That's why I said the most important thing is to be politically correct and to stay healthy. Because if you stay healthy, then you can get back out there. You keep playing. You can make up for bad games.
I'm telling you, it's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. But I was going to ask, when you say stay healthy, does that mean you don't play to your highest level because you're worrying about injuring yourself?
It means you have to be professional. It means you have to eat right. You have to stretch. You got to get to the gym early. You got to get treatment. You got to do ice. You got to do everything, every step. You cannot skip any steps when it comes to taking care of your body. If you do get injured, you have to know what that injury is, how it happened, and you can ask the trainers. You can go on Google, figure out what the treatments are for this particular injury, and so it doesn't happen again. But the key is to get back out there as quick as possible, and then also to learn how to play with pain, I guess. All athletes have to do that, but I would say that the thing that kept me playing for such a long time at a high level was maintenance, taking care of my body, and pain management. Really, that's the key to stay healthy.
And you were doing this mostly on your own, or did you?
So again, I played for a very good team that had a lot of support. I did play for teams that weren't as sophisticated as Maccabi.
Right.
But I didn't rely on
resources there.
The teams there. I did things on my own to do my own research and to buy like a stim machine. Something that they use for the team. I'd say, how much is it? They'd give me the price. I'd say, I want one so I can have one in my house. So when I go home, when we go on the road, I can do my own treatment in the hotel room. Yeah. And then I wouldn't have to rely on your equipment working or some other guys using it. I'd bring my own ice because what if the ice machine's not working at some gym wherever you're playing? And I got ice my knees, so I'm taking ice from the hotel to make sure I got ice for my knees after.
Wow.
I'm traveling everywhere with my foam roller, because if you go somewhere, they don't have a foam roller. I need that. So you have to be proactive.
You
with
could
that
write
stuff.
a book to help athletes. My God.
How
that's-
to?
Yeah.
What was your suitcases looking like? You've got your foam roller and your ice maker and
Oh,
your
that's it.
stem
I didn't go
machine and you
anywhere
have
without
food
it.
and
Yeah, I mean, bar. You to take a power bar with you because you never know when your next meal. You know when it's going to be, but you could be stuck in traffic. Guys are taking their
Exactly.
while. You have to you got to do every step and be extreme about it if you want to have a good long career at a high level. I mean, if you cut corners anywhere, it's going to show up. And
Yeah.
yeah, but again, I'm just trying to imagine NBA players like, going, man, I better pack my power bar, otherwise I'm
They
in a
don't have
different
it now,
world.
do they?
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Knee pads. I mean, if you like arm sleeves, buy your arm sleeves before you leave.
Right.
If you wear ankle braces, get those in America before you go overseas. If you need orthotics for your shoes, make sure you have those taken care of. If you need special shoes, don't get over there and just think they're going to give you your favorite Nikes, because they may be a Asics sponsored and you're going to have
Right.
to wear Asics because that's what they give you.
Sure.
So you have to, and in your contract, if you want to wear Nikes and the team is Adidas, you got to put in your contract that says, I can only wear Nikes because my foot responds well to Nikes. And so these are small details that you got to know about, and you only know about that from experience or from if your agent or someone like myself talks to you. And
Like I
says, "Hey."
said, can
Yeah.
I be the agent for your book? Because oh my God, I mean,
Telling me there.
Yeah.
That's a whole other business here that we've just tapped into.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to go back to it's a big business.
Yeah.
I brought up the football league in England or in Europe called the Rivals Professional Football League, and this league exists to be a funnel for football players that weren't able to play in the U.S. So they put it out there. They say, apply, come to our combines. They'll pay you if they draft you. I mean, it's not the same. And the full goal of this league is to get you playing and to get you film, okay, and to get you prepared to go back to whatever league that you want to go to.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big business. There are people who are, fighting to be in this. Also seeing all of the websites for, there's a European, again, American football league where, it's like, if you're interested in trying out, here's where you try out. If you're interested in the agents, here are the agents. Here's what you're going to need. And this goes across the board. I saw it in baseball. If you want to go play baseball in South Korea, there is a business out there that will help you do that.
There's a clear path.
There is a very clear path. So I'm not joking. You should write a book because there's obviously a big enough market where you have organizations that have been created around the kind of, let's say, the more professionally organized leagues.
And it's not
in
just
order to funnel.
What I'm talking about being professional isn't just in basketball. It goes across the board in every sport. If
And
you're-
in life, those are life skills. Just knowing how to show up to work.
prepare yourself,
Right.
and in sports it's all about your body. That's what's your tool. So
Sure.
if you understand it in any sport, you can do well.
Now, I'll ask a distillery focused question. Do you think that athletes that have had that overseas experience, because of the fact they've had to really take care of themselves, because of the fact that they have been thrown into these sometimes very adverse situations and conditions, are able to transition out of sports in a different way than, say, with all due respect to the elite athletes in our professional sports that are very pampered and taken care of, and they have a team of agents and they have money managers, and you hear how many times that so-and-so has now gone bankrupt after making $100 million. Like, do you feel like maybe that life experience that you get helps prepare an athlete for what they're going to do after they finish? No.
I think it's harder, actually.
Wow.
So when you go overseas, you get a salary. That's it. You don't get a 401k. You don't get anybody, teaching you about financial management. You don't have anybody come in and talk to you about media training.
Right.
You don't get to go through your whole career with somebody helping you, asking you, what do you want to do when you're done?
Sure.
Giving you this internship. You get a salary. You come home for the summer. You spend it with your family. You get a contract. You go back overseas. It's on you to open up an IRA,
Right.
to get life insurance,
Yeah.
to make investments. And then when you retire, you're on your own. There's no pension. I mean, if you play in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, if you play a certain number of years, you know that when you turn 40, you're going to get a couple $1,000s a month for the rest of your life. There's nothing like that for overseas players. When we come home and we're done playing, we're on our own.
Yeah.
We have no support. Our team overseas is not going to help us.
Right.
We don't have NBA, or I like to call it PhD, next to our name, so we could just go to any organization and say, can we have a job? And they say, oh, NBA, yeah, come on in. You know, nobody knows us over here. We're just guys that, you know, played overseas and played ball.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more challenging for overseas guys. And the longer you play overseas, the more challenging it becomes.
To come back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because you don't have the relationships over here.
You know, it's so interesting. Again, even my own personal experience living in London for 10 years and coming back here, you know, I didn't have credit here for 10 years because everything was over there. And I came back, it's like, I can't even sign a lease because I don't have any credit. So I literally had to have help from my father just to sign a lease because for 10 years I didn't exist in the United States.
Right.
Effectively. So fascinating.
So are you still connected to basketball at all now?
You know, I love basketball.
Yeah.
I think more than anything, I love teaching basketball to kids. I think that, you know, for me, I like to see growth, and I like to teach a kid something, and the next week he comes back and he does it automatically. I get a lot of joy from that. They also look up to me. I mean, again, if I go to a college, these guys don't know who I am. You know, I mean, you know, I even though I was a good high school player, it's not like I played in the NBA and they're going, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. They're looking at me like, he played overseas. He's not an NBA guy. So I like coaching kids.
We know your value. We know your value. I hate to do this, but we've just gotten the 1 minute warning and it goes by so fast. I want to say, both of us want to say thank you, David. I think this topic is fascinating. I think there's so much more to explore. I think you need to write a book.
And we'll have you back on the show to talk about the book.
Exactly.
You're going to write.
Marshy, as always, we love when you join us. Thanks for being with us and giving us your perspective. Thank you very much, Jarvis, for hanging with us through a rough beginning. Our next show is on February 13th, which is almost Valentine's Day. We may have to theme it. I don't know.
Oh, you
we
would.
have to wear red. I'm not sure. How do we do a show on love and sports?
She's lost it.
Okay. Remember to like us on our Facebook page for the distillery. We now have a weekly blog that you can find on our website, thedistilleryinc.com. You can also subscribe to the show on iTunes and Castbox. And finally, you can see our archive shows on YouTube. Thank you as always for being here. We really appreciate all of you who tuned in today, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.